I always thought my life with Clara was a quiet masterpiece, a canvas painted with steady strokes of trust and routine. 20 years married, 2 kids grown and off to college, and a house in the suburbs that smelled of her lavender candles and my woodshop projects. She was a creature of habit. Coffee at 7 a.m., yoga at noon, and her little book club every Thursday night. I ran my hardware store downtown, the kind of place where locals lingered to gossip over nails and paint cans. We weren't flashy people, but we were solid. Or so I believed. It started with a flicker, a tiny crack in the picture I'd framed of us. Clara began coming home from book club later than usual. 10 p.m. stretched to midnight, then 1 a.m. She'd slip in, cheeks flushed, muttering about deep discussions over wine. I didn't pry. I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? She'd always been the steady one, the woman who'd nursed me through a broken leg and laughed at my terrible puns. But then the phone calls started. She'd step outside to take them, her voice low, her laughter sharp and unfamiliar. I'd catch snippets. "Oh, you're ridiculous," before she'd hang up and claim it was her sister, Ellen, who lived 3 states away. One night I couldn't sleep. The bed felt too big without her warmth beside me. She texted that she'd be late again. Something about a heated debate over The Great Gatsby. I wandered downstairs, poured a whiskey, and sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker. At 2:17 a.m., her car rolled into the driveway. She stepped out, but she wasn't alone. A man climbed out of the passenger seat, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a leather jacket that gleamed under the moon. They didn't see me. They stood by the car, her hand brushing his arm, his head dipping close to hers. My stomach twisted, but I told myself it was nothing. A friend. A ride home. I went back to bed, but sleep never came. The next morning, she hummed in the kitchen like nothing had happened. I watched her over my coffee, searching for a sign. A tremble, a blush, anything. "Good book club?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She nodded, buttering toast. "Oh, the usual. Lots of opinions." I wanted to ask about the man, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I went to work, the image of that leather jacket burning behind my eyes. Days turned into weeks, and the late nights multiplied. Clara's excuses grew flimsier. Book club, a friend's crisis, a spontaneous coffee run with the girls. I started noticing things I'd missed before. The way she'd angle her phone away from me, the faint scent of cologne on her scarf, the extra care she took with her hair. I wasn't a suspicious man by nature, but doubt is a weed. It grows if you let it. And I was letting it. I decided to dig. Not out of malice, but curiosity. I waited until she left for book club one Thursday, then checked her laptop. She'd left it open on the kitchen counter. A rare slip for someone so meticulous. Her email was a goldmine. Messages from a Mark littered her inbox, buried under innocent subject lines like book recommendations and Thursday plans. But the words inside weren't innocent. "Can't stop thinking about last time," one read. "You're driving me wild," said another. My hands shook as I scrolled, each line a knife twisting deeper. There were no details, no explicit confessions, but the tone was unmistakable. This wasn't friendship. I cross-referenced the name. Mark Hensley. A quick search on my phone pulled up his profile. He was a local artist, some pretentious type who sculpted junk into modern art and sold it for thousands. Leather jacket, smug grin, the kind of guy who'd charm his way into anything. I remembered Clara mentioning him once, months ago, something about a gallery opening she'd dragged me to. I thought he was harmless, just another artsy flake. Now his face stared back at me from the screen, and I felt the ground shift beneath me. That night, I waited up again. She came home at 1:43 a.m., her lipstick smudged, her blouse wrinkled in a way that didn't match her story of sitting around with books. I asked her point blank, "How's Mark doing?" Her eyes widened, just for a second, before she laughed it off. "Mark? Oh, he's fine." "Why?" I didn't push. Not yet. But I knew. The betrayal wasn't just in her words. It was in the air, thick and sour, like a storm rolling in. I couldn't sleep anymore. The bed felt like a battlefield, her side a silent accusation. I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment I'd ignored. The late nights, the phone calls, the man in the leather jacket. Clara acted like nothing was wrong, breezing through our days with her usual grace. But I saw the cracks now. The way she'd linger in the bathroom, texting furiously. The way she'd flinch when I came up behind her. I wasn't imagining it. She was slipping away, and I was the fool who'd let it happen. I needed proof. Not for her, but for me. I bought a small GPS tracker from the store, nothing fancy, just something hunters used for their dogs. One evening, while she showered, I slipped it into the lining of her purse. The next Thursday, I watched the dot on my phone as it moved, not to the library where book club met, but to a loft downtown, Mark Hensley's address. She stayed there for 3 hours. When she came home, she smelled of patchouli and something musky, not her usual lavender. "Good night," I asked, my voice steady. "Wonderful," she said, kissing my cheek. I nodded, swallowing the bile in my throat. The next day I went further. I borrowed a friend's car, a beat-up sedan Clara wouldn't recognize, and followed her. She parked outside Mark's loft, and I watched from across the street as they emerged together, laughing, her hand on his back. They didn't go far, just a dive bar 2 blocks over. Through the window, I saw them in a corner booth, her foot brushing his under the table, his fingers tracing her wrist. It wasn't the act itself that gutted me. It was the intimacy, the ease, the way she looked at him like she'd never looked at me. I drove home in a daze. The house was too quiet, too hers. I poured a whiskey and sat in the dark, letting the truth settle. She wasn't just betraying me with her body. She was giving him pieces of her soul, the parts I'd thought were mine forever. And that's when the idea of revenge took root. Not loud or violent, but cold, calculated, and cruel. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Rage simmered beneath my skin, but I buried it deep, letting it sharpen my thoughts. Clara had always underestimated me, called me predictable, safe. She'd never see this coming. I started planning, piecing together a revenge that would unravel her world as slowly and completely as she'd unraveled mine. But first, I needed to know more about Mark Hensley, the man who'd stolen my wife. I spent days researching him. His art was his life. Twisted metal sculptures that critics fawned over, displayed in galleries across the state. He had a reputation, too. Charming, reckless, a man who thrived on attention. I found his social media, his interviews, his calendar of upcoming shows. Clara's name never appeared, but her presence was there, a shadow in his posts about inspiration and late-night muses. I even drove by his loft again, noting the security cameras, the neighbors, the rhythm of his life. He was cocky, careless. That would be his downfall. At home, I played the part of the oblivious husband. I cooked dinner, asked about her day, smiled when she lied. She didn't notice the change in me, the way my eyes lingered, the way my silence stretched. One night, she came home giddy, her hair tousled, claiming she'd lost track of time. I nodded, pouring her wine, and asked casually, "What's Mark been working on lately?" She froze, then recovered with a laugh. "Oh, some new piece. Why do you care?" "Just curious," I said, sipping my drink. She changed the subject, but I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes. That's when I found it, the final straw. In her coat pocket, crumpled and forgotten, was a receipt from a hotel an hour away. Dated last month, paid in cash, with a handwritten note on the back. "Next time, my place. M." My hands trembled as I held it, the paper fragile but heavy with truth. She'd gone that far, planned it, savored it. And I'd been here, fixing shelves, waiting for her. The revenge in my mind hardened into something real, something she'd never recover from. The plan took shape in the quiet hours, when the house creaked and Clara slept beside me, oblivious. I wouldn't stoop to her level, no shouting, no tears, no messy confrontation. My revenge would be a masterpiece, slow and deliberate, stripping away everything she valued. Her reputation, her lover, her peace. I'd use her own weaknesses against her, and Mark's too. They thought they were clever, untouchable. I proved them wrong. I started small. At the hardware store, I had access to tools, materials, connections. I knew a guy, Dave, who did private security, discreet, no questions asked. I hired him to tail Mark, not Clara. I wanted dirt, leverage, anything I could twist. Within a week, Dave delivered. Photos of Mark at his loft with other women, not just Clara. He was a player, juggling multiple lives, and my wife was just one of his toys. The photos burned in my hands. Clara deserved better, even now, but she'd chosen this. Next, I turned to her world. Book club was her alibi, her sacred circle. I called Ellen, Clara's sister, under the pretense of planning a surprise party. She's been so busy with book club, I said, fishing. Ellen laughed. Book club? She hasn't gone in months. Said she was helping a friend with some art project. The lie stung, but it was fuel. I thanked Ellen and hung up, my mind racing. If her friends didn't know, they'd be the perfect audience for what came next. I began planting seeds. At dinner, I'd drop hints, casual mentions of Mark's sculptures, questions about her late nights. She'd squirm, deflect, but I kept my tone light, my face calm. One evening, I left the hotel receipt on the counter, folded but visible. She found it, paled, and shoved it into her purse without a word. I watched her panic grow, her lies piling up. She didn't know how much I knew, and that was my power. The real revenge was still coming. A storm she'd never see until it broke over her head. Clara's unease grew palpable, a shadow trailing her every move. She'd glance at me over breakfast, searching my face for clues, but I gave her nothing, just smiles and small talk. The receipt had rattled her, and I let it fester. I wanted her to feel the weight of her own secrets, to wonder how much I'd uncovered. Meanwhile, I tightened the noose around Mark. Dave's photos were gold. Mark with a redhead at a bar, a brunette leaving his loft at dawn. Clara wasn't his only game, and that knowledge fueled me. If she was disposable to him, I'd make sure he was disposable to her. I started with his art. Mark's next big show was in 2 weeks, a gallery opening downtown where he'd unveil his latest piece. Critics were buzzing, calling it his most personal work yet. I dug deeper, found the gallery's contact, and posed as a journalist. A quick call revealed the piece was a towering sculpture of welded steel and glass, inspired by a muse who changed everything. My gut churned. Clara. I could picture her preening at the thought, oblivious to the other women in his orbit. That sculpture would be my first target. At home, I kept the pressure subtle. I'd hum tunes she hated, leave art magazines open to Mark's interviews, watch her squirm when I asked about her creative friends. One night, she snapped, "Why are you so obsessed with Mark lately?" Her voice was sharp, defensive. I shrugged, sipping my whiskey. "Just seems like an interesting guy. You've mentioned him a lot." She flushed, muttered something about laundry, and fled the room. I smiled into my glass. She was cracking, and I hadn't even started. The next day, I visited the gallery. Not as myself, but as a delivery guy, cap low, clipboard in hand, a fake invoice for a non-existent shipment. The staff barely glanced at me as I wandered, scoping the layout. Security cameras, exits, the spot where Mark's sculpture would stand. It was reckless, sure, but I needed to see it, to feel the space where I'd strike. The plan was forming. Something quiet, devastating, and perfectly tailored to their egos. I left unnoticed, my pulse steady, my mind clear. Dave came through again. He tapped into Mark's less savory habits, late-night deals with shady types, cash exchanges in alleys. Mark wasn't just an artist. He was a hustler, funding his lifestyle with side gigs that skirted the law. It was perfect. I didn't care about his crimes, only how I could use them. I told Dave to keep digging, to get names, dates, proof I could wield like a blade. Meanwhile, I turned my attention to Clara's social world, the one she'd built around her lies. Her book club friends were a tight-knit bunch. Linda, Sue, Karen, women who'd sip wine and dissect novels while their husbands golfed. I invited them over for a spontaneous dinner, claiming Clara had suggested it. She hadn't, of course, and when they arrived, her confusion was delicious. "Oh, I must have forgotten," she stammered, shooting me a look. I played the doting host, pouring drinks, steering the conversation to art. "Clara's been so inspired lately," I said, watching her tense. "She's been helping a sculptor friend, right?" The women exchanged glances. Linda frowned. "I thought you quit book club for yoga." Clara laughed too loud, spilling her wine. I refilled her glass, smiling. After they left, she cornered me. "What was that about?" Her voice trembled. "Just being friendly," I said, brushing past her. She didn't sleep that night. I heard her pacing, muttering to herself. "Good. Let her stew." The next day, I mailed an anonymous tip to the gallery. A vague note about concerns over Mark's materials, hinting at stolen goods. It wouldn't stop the show, but it'd plant doubt, make them look closer. I wanted his world to tighten, just as I was tightening hers. I kept tabs on the GPS in her purse. She met Mark twice that week, their visits shorter, more frantic. I pictured them arguing, her demanding answers, him brushing her off. The photos Dave sent confirmed it. Mark's smirk was gone, replaced by a scowl. Clara's betrayal had been a game to him, but I'd turn it into his nightmare. And hers. The gallery opening loomed, and I finalized the first blow. Mark's sculpture relied on precision. Steel beams welded to glass panels. A delicate balance of form and fragility. I'd learned enough from my hardware days to know how to disrupt it. Not destroy it outright, that'd be too crude, but sabotage it subtly, publicly, in a way that'd humiliate him. I bought a small vial of industrial adhesive, the kind that expands when exposed to heat. A tiny dose in the right joint, and the sculpture would buckle under its own weight, right when he needed it most. Getting in was easy. The gallery hosted a pre-show setup, open to staff and artists. I slipped in as a maintenance worker, overalls, toolbox, a forged badge from a friend who owed me a favor. Mark was there, barking orders, his leather jacket slung over a chair. Clara wasn't with him, but her influence was everywhere. The curves of the glass, the way he fussed over it. I waited until he stepped out for a smoke, then approached the sculpture. A quick injection into a weld, hidden by a seam, and I was gone. No one stopped me. No one cared. At home, Clara was a ghost. Distant, jumpy, her phone glued to her hand. I asked about the opening, feigning interest. "Mark's big night's coming up. You going?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe. It's a busy week." I let it drop, but I knew she'd be there, basking in his spotlight. That's when I'd hit them both. The adhesive would take hours to react. By the time the crowd arrived, the damage would be slow, inevitable, a collapse timed for maximum shame. I tested her again that night, left a photo of Mark's loft, snapped by Dave, on the coffee table, no explanation. She found it, froze, then shoved it in a drawer. "Where'd you get this?" she asked, voice tight. "Found it in the store," I lied. Thought it looked familiar. She didn't respond, just poured herself a drink with shaking hands. I watched her unravel, piece by piece, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The night of the opening arrived, and I didn't go. I didn't need to. Dave was there, blending into the crowd, ready to report every detail. Clara left the house at 6 p.m., dolled up in a dress I hadn't seen before. Black, sleek, not her usual style. "Don't wait up," she said, avoiding my eyes. I nodded, sipping my coffee, already picturing the chaos ahead. The adhesive would have started working by now, swelling in the heat of the gallery lights, stressing the sculpture's joints. I sat by the window waiting for Dave's call. "It came at 9:47 p.m. You should have seen it," he said, voice low. Thing held up for the speeches. Mark yapping about his muse. Then bam, the glass cracked. Whole piece leaned, then crashed right in front of everyone. Critics gasping, Clara white as a sheet. Mark tried to laugh it off, but he was sweating bullets. I asked about her. "She bolted after 10 minutes, Dave said. Looked like she'd seen a ghost." I thanked him and hung up, imagining her driving home, humiliated, furious, confused. She stormed in at 11 p.m., mascara streaked, her dress wrinkled. "You didn't tell me you were going out," I said mildly. She glared. "It was a disaster. Mark's ruined." "Shame," I replied, flipping through a magazine. She didn't mention the sculpture, didn't ask if I knew. But the air between us crackled. She suspected something, even if she couldn't name it. I let her stew, knowing the real blow was still coming. The next morning, the papers ran it. Artist's triumph turns to tragedy. Photos showed the wreckage, Mark's stunned face, Clara blurred in the background. Gossip spread, faulty materials, sabotage, bad luck. I clipped the article, left it on the counter. She saw it, paled, and said nothing. I hummed as I cooked breakfast, watching her world shrink. Mark's downfall was only the beginning. The gallery fiasco tanked his reputation. Clients canceled orders. Critics turned on him, whispers of amateur and fraud dogging his name. I fed the fire anonymously. Tips to art blogs about his shady deals. Photos of his other women leaked to tabloids. He didn't know who was behind it, but I did. And Clara? She was a wreck. Snapping at me, locking herself in the bedroom, her phone silent for once. She'd lost her escape, her thrill, and I hadn't even raised my voice. I shifted focus to her now. Her friends were next. I invited Linda over for coffee, played the concerned husband. "Clara's been off lately," I said, sighing. "Ever since she started helping that artist. I'm worried she's in over her head." Linda's eyes widened. "Helping?" She told us she was sick of book club. I nodded, letting her connect the dots. By the next day, the group chat was buzzing. Clara's lies exposed, her absence questioned. She came home to a voicemail from Sue. "We need to talk. What's going on with you?" She listened, deleted it, and stared at me. "Did you say something?" "About what?" I asked, innocent. She didn't answer. I kept pushing. Left Mark's loft photo out again. This time with a note. "Miss this place." She found it, tore it up, her hands shaking. I mailed her a burner phone, untraceable, with a single text. "He's not worth it." She got it at work, called me in a panic. "What's this? Are you messing with me?" "No idea," I said, calm. "Maybe it's from your artist." She hung up, but the seed was planted. Doubt, fear, isolation. I was stripping her bare, one layer at a time. Clara's unraveling was a quiet symphony, each note sharper than the last. Her friends pulled away. Linda's coffee chats turned to icy texts. Sue stopped calling. Karen unfriended her online. The book club she'd used as a shield was gone, replaced by whispers of her secret life. I'd nudged it along, dropping hints to the right people, letting their judgment do the work. She'd come home hollow-eyed, snapping at shadows, blaming me without proof. "You're doing this?" she hissed one night, clutching her wineglass. "I don't know how, but you are." I shrugged, polishing a wrench. "You're imagining things, Clara." Mark was crumbling too. The tabloid leaks, his affairs, his deals had clients fleeing. Galleries dropped him, his loft went up for sale. I'd paid Dave to dig deeper, and he'd found gold. Tax evasion, unpaid debts, a forged signature on a grant. I didn't turn it over to the cops. Not yet. I sent it to Mark instead. A thick envelope with no return address, stuffed with photocopies and a note. "She's not worth this." Let him sweat, wondering who knew, if Clara had betrayed him too. I wanted them turning on each other. At home, I tightened the screws. I'd leave the GPS tracker on the counter, cleaned and gleaming, no explanation. She'd stare at it, then at me, her lips trembling. "Where'd you get that?" she'd ask. "Found it in the garage," I'd say, casual. She stopped carrying her purse after that, but the damage was done. She knew I'd followed her, tracked her lies. I'd hum as I cooked, watch her flinch at every creak of the house. She was a prisoner in her own skin, and I was the warden. One night, she broke. "I'm leaving," she said, bags half-packed, eyes wild. "I can't do this anymore." I didn't stop her. "Go ahead," I said, sipping my whiskey. "But where to?" "Mark's broke. And your friends are done with you. She froze, then sank onto the couch, sobbing. I left her there, the sound of her defeat ringing in my ears. She didn't leave. She couldn't. I'd taken everything else. The next phase was public, brutal, and perfectly disguised. Mark's loft sold cheap. A cash deal to a developer who'd turn it into condos. I tipped them off through a proxy, knowing he'd lose his sanctuary. But I wasn't done. His last gallery piece, the one that hadn't collapsed, was up for auction, a desperate bid to salvage his name. I bid anonymously, won it for pennies, and had it delivered to our house. When Clara saw it, twisted steel and glass, his muse, she gasped, hands flying to her mouth. Why? She whispered. Thought it'd look nice in the yard, I said, hammering stakes to mount it. She watched, mute, as I turned her betrayal into lawn art. Her phone stayed silent now, no Mark, no friends, just me. I call her from the store, cheerful, asking about her day. She'd mumble responses, voice flat. I'd come home with groceries, cook her favorite meals, act like nothing had changed. But everything had. She'd sit across from me, picking at her food, eyes darting to that sculpture outside. I'd catch her staring, lost in it, and smile. Pretty, isn't it? I'd say. She'd nod, trapped in her own guilt. Mark tried reaching her. I saw the blocked calls on her phone when she left it unattended. I unblocked one, texted him from her number. Leave me alone. It's over. He replied instantly. You're nothing without me. I screenshotted it, printed it, left it on her pillow. She found it that night, crumpled it, and wept. I stood in the doorway, silent, letting her drown in his words. She didn't know I'd sent the message, but she felt the sting. They were tearing each other apart, and I was the ghost pulling strings. I mailed Mark one last gift, a photo of the sculpture in our yard, captioned, She kept this. No signature. Let him wonder. Let him rage. I'd taken his art, his pride, his lover, and turned them against him. Clara stopped leaving the house. She'd shuffle between rooms, a shadow in leggings and unwashed hair, her spark gone. I'd catch her staring at the sculpture, tracing its lines with her eyes, as if it held answers. I kept up the act, cheerful, oblivious, the husband she'd underestimated. Want to go for a walk? I'd ask. She'd shake her head, retreating to the couch. I didn't push. She was right where I wanted her. Isolated, broken, her world shrunk to these walls and that twisted relic outside. Mark's end came faster than I'd expected. The tax evasion evidence I'd held back found its way to the IRS. Another anonymous tip, untraceable. They raided his new apartment, a dingy rental he'd fled to. Papers ran the story. Fallen artist faces charges. He lost everything, credibility, freedom, the last scraps of his ego. I clipped the article, framed it, hung it in the hallway. Clara saw it, froze, then looked at me. You? She whispered. Just thought it was interesting, I said, adjusting the frame. She didn't ask again, but the fear in her eyes was new, sharp, delicious. I invited her sister Ellen over, the final twist. Ellen arrived, all hugs and concern, oblivious to the depth of it. I steered the conversation, mentioned Mark's arrest, Clara's art phase, the sculpture. Ellen frowned. You never told me about this guy, Clara. What happened? Clara stammered, caught off guard. I chimed in, casual. She was his muse. Didn't she tell you? Ellen's face hardened. Betrayal, judgment, all aimed at her sister. You've changed, Ellen said, leaving early. Clara sat there, stunned, as another thread snapped. That night she tried to talk. I'm sorry, she said, voice small. I didn't mean. I cut her off. For what? Book club. She flinched, knowing I knew. I left her there, her apology rotting in the air. She'd feel it all now. Every loss, every lie, every choice. The house became a mausoleum, Clara its ghost. She stopped eating much, stopped speaking unless I spoke first. The sculpture loomed outside, rusting in the rain, a monument to her ruin. I'd catch her watching it from the window, tears streaking her face, and I'd hum, polish tools, live around her like she was furniture. She'd lost her lover, her friends, her sister, her pride. I'd strip them away, piece by piece, without ever raising a hand. That was the beauty of it. Mark's trial started a quiet affair. He pled guilty, got 3 years, pennies compared to what he'd taken from me. I sent him a care package, a photo of the sculpture, a clipping of his arrest, a note, "Enjoy the view." The prison wouldn't let it through, but the gesture was enough. I pictured him hearing about it, seething in his cell, knowing I'd won. Clara didn't know I'd sent it. She didn't need to. Her punishment was here, in this house, in the silence I'd built around her. I started leaving relics of her betrayal everywhere. Mark's loft photo taped to the fridge, the hotel receipt in a drawer, the burner phone on the mantel. She'd find them, move them, but I'd put them back. A game, a reminder, a slow bleed. One day, she screamed, hurling the phone at the wall. "Stop it!" she yelled. "Stop what?" I asked, calm. She sank to the floor, defeated. I stepped over her, went to work, left her there. Her final break came quietly. She packed a bag again, left a note. "I can't stay." I let her go, didn't chase her. She had nowhere to run. Penniless, friendless, her name tied to Mark's scandal. I'd taken her life apart, left her a shell. The house was mine now, the sculpture her only legacy. I sat by it that night, whiskey in hand, and toasted the emptiness. Clara didn't come back. Word trickled in. She'd moved to a cheap motel, then vanished, a footnote in the gossip that faded fast. I didn't care where she went. She'd carry her ruin with her, a weight I'd forged. The house stayed quiet, the sculpture rusted through winter, and I lived on, steady, unchanged, the man she'd never truly seen. Friends asked about her, and I'd shrug. She needed space, I'd say, and they'd nod, moving on. No one suspected. No one knew. Mark served his time, got out early for good behavior. I heard he moved west, tried to start over, but his name was poison. Galleries wouldn't touch him, collectors laughed him off. I'd check his sparse online presence sometimes, see the desperation in his posts, and feel nothing. He'd been a pawn, a tool to break her, and I'd discarded him when he'd served his purpose. The sculpture stayed in the yard, a jagged sentinel, until a storm toppled it. I left it there, a heap of junk, like their affair. I sold the house a year later, moved to a cabin upstate. Small, simple, mine. The hardware store thrived. My hands stayed busy. My nights were calm. Clara's lavender scent faded, replaced by pine and earth. I didn't think of her much, didn't need to. She'd betrayed me in a way I'd never imagined, with a man who'd never deserved her, and I'd answered with a revenge that matched it. Slow, silent, absolute. Not a shout, not a blow, but a dismantling so complete she'd never recover. Sometimes, I'd sit by the fire, sip whiskey, and wonder if she'd pieced it together. How I'd turned her lies into her cage, her lover into her shame. I doubted it. She'd never known me, not really, and that was her mistake. I'd been the steady one, the safe one, until I wasn't. Now I was free and she was nothing. The end was mine to write, and I'd written it well.